Nobody expected Keanu and Sandra to show up like this. The party changed instantly. The night was alive with music, laughter, and the glitter of golden chandeliers. The ballroom shimmered with elegance as guests in tailored suits and sparkling gowns moved about with polished smiles. It was the kind of party where appearances mattered more than words, where whispers carried faster than footsteps, and where everyone secretly waited for something unusual to break the pattern. Then it happened. The grand doors opened with a slow creak, and in that single moment the room fell silent. Every head turned, every conversation stopped. Standing in the doorway, hand in hand, were Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. Nobody had expected them to come, let alone together. Their arrival was like a spark in dry grass, spreading shock through the crowd. The energy shifted, and the once predictable evening turned into something unforgettable. Keanu's quiet presence was already known to many. His humble posture, the way he never tried to draw attention, made him stand out even more. Sandra, glowing with a simple grace that needed no diamonds or heavy jewels, walked beside him with a calm confidence. Together, they seemed untouched by the noise of fame, carrying instead an aura of kindness and respect. The whispers began almost immediately. People exchanged looks of disbelief, some smiling in admiration, others holding back envy. A few wondered aloud if this was a show, a planned act to shake the headlines. But the way Keanu gently squeezed Sandra's hand and the way she leaned closer as if to draw strength from him told a deeper story. This was no stunt. This was real, and that truth made the moment heavier, almost sacred. In the corner of the hall, a group of old friends from the film industry stood frozen. They remembered the years when Keanu and Sandra had first shared the screen, their chemistry lighting up films and hearts alike. Time had passed, careers had grown, but never had anyone imagined seeing them like this, united not for cameras but for each other. The nostalgia in their eyes mixed with a quiet respect. As the two walked forward, the crowd parted without a word. It was not fear that moved them aside, but something softer, almost like reverence. People who just minutes ago were laughing loudly now stood still, as if humbled by the unexpected sight. The atmosphere of the party changed instantly. It was no longer about wealth or influence, but about something far more human: connection, humility, and the courage to stand together despite what others might say. But not everyone was moved with admiration. In another corner of the room, envy burned silently. Some felt threatened by the sudden shift in attention. Jealousy whispered through clenched jaws and tightened smiles. The party had been predictable until now, but Keanu and Sandra's arrival was a reminder that true presence cannot be bought, that respect belongs not to the loudest voice, but to the quietest soul who carries kindness. Then came the first twist. As Keanu and Sandra made their way toward the center of the room, an older guest, known for his harsh words and sharp opinions, stepped into their path. His voice cut through the silence, heavy with doubt and pride. "So this is how you decide, to appear, hand in hand, as if the world belongs to you?" The words were meant to wound, to test their strength. The hall held its breath. Every eye turned, waiting for anger, waiting for conflict to break the calm. But Keanu's face softened, instead of hardening. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of humility, and spoke in a voice so gentle it carried farther than any shout. "The world does not belong to us. We only belong to each other tonight." Sandra smiled faintly, her eyes steady and unshaken. Her silence was stronger than 1,000 replies, and in that silence, the man who had spoken so harshly suddenly felt smaller. He looked around and realized that the crowd was not with him. They were with them. The mood shifted again. Admiration returned, this time deeper than before. What had started as shock was turning into inspiration. People saw more than just two stars walking hand in hand. They saw the strength of humility, the power of kindness, and the resilience to face doubt without anger. It was a lesson written not in speeches, but in actions. The music began to play again, softer this time, almost like it was bowing to the moment. Conversations slowly resumed, but they were no longer the same shallow exchanges. There was a new energy in the room, an undercurrent of respect that had not been there before, and yet, in the quiet corners of the ballroom, tension remained. Jealousy had not left. It waited, it planned, and it would return. The night had only begun, and the journey of Keanu and Sandra at this party was far from over. What nobody knew was that their appearance tonight would not just change the evening, but the lives of many who watched them walk through those doors. The first chapter of this story had unfolded, filled with silence, whispers, and a spark that could not be ignored. The question now was simple. How long could their calm presence hold against the storms that jealousy and pride were about to unleash? Whispers of jealousy and the weight of silence. The music flowed again through the golden hall, but it no longer felt like background noise. Every note seemed slower, softer, almost as if the instruments themselves were watching what would happen next. Keanu and Sandra had already shifted the entire mood of the party, and though the crowd tried to act as if nothing unusual had happened, their eyes kept drifting back. People whispered behind half-hidden smiles. "Did you see the way he held her hand?" one guest murmured. "It wasn't for show. It was real." Another whispered, "But why here? Why tonight? What are they trying to prove?" Each question spread like fire through dry grass, and the answers came in the form of assumptions, jealousy, and secret admiration. Yet beneath the surface of this noise, something deeper was stirring. Respect. Quiet, unspoken, almost reluctant. Respect. Some of the guests, people who had lived in a world of endless competition, suddenly found themselves remembering what it felt like to see kindness in its purest form. It was confusing. It was uncomfortable. But it was powerful enough that they could not look away. Sandra noticed it first. As she scanned the crowd, she could see the different faces. Some filled with awe, others tightened with envy. She leaned slightly toward Keanu and whispered, "They are watching every step we take." He smiled softly, not to dismiss her words, but to remind her that he already knew. "Let them," he replied gently, "because tonight isn't about them. It's about us, and about what they see in us." The crowd shifted again when an unexpected figure entered the scene. A young actor hungry for fame, who had often spoken behind people's backs, approached them with a drink in hand. His smile was too wide, his voice too sharp. "Well, isn't this the performance of the year? Hand in hand, acting like the world's most humble couple." His tone was coated with sarcasm, and his words carried farther than he intended. Gasps slipped through the room. Everyone had been waiting for another spark, and now it was here. All eyes returned to Keanu and Sandra. Would they fight back? Would they expose anger? But Keanu's reaction was not anger. It was silence. He simply looked at the young actor with eyes that held no malice, only understanding. And that silence became heavier than any insult. The young actor's smirk faltered. Silence, when carried with dignity, can be louder than 1,000 replies. Sandra stepped forward, her voice calm but filled with an unshakable strength. "Humility is not a performance," she said softly. "It is who we are when no one is watching." Her words landed like a stone dropped into still water, creating ripples that moved through every guest in the hall. The young actor tried to laugh it off, but the sound died in his throat. He looked around for support, but found none. The crowd, once entertained by drama, now leaned quietly toward admiration. Something in their hearts told them that they had just witnessed a lesson. Strength does not always roar. Sometimes it stands calm and unshaken in the face of insult. In that moment, the entire hall felt different again. People who had come for glamour now felt as if they were witnessing something larger than themselves. Some were embarrassed at their own jealousy. Others were humbled by the reminder that respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned. And yet, in the back of the hall, a storm was brewing. A group of powerful guests, known for controlling attention and influence, exchanged glances. They were not pleased. They had built their lives on being the center of attention, and tonight, two people who did not even try had stolen that power with nothing but kindness. "This cannot go on," one of them whispered. "If they continue like this, nobody will care about us anymore." The words carried bitterness, but also fear. For the first time, they realized that real respect outshines shallow applause. As the night moved forward, Keanu and Sandra found themselves surrounded not by noise, but by silence. A silence filled with eyes, with curiosity, with quiet judgment. It was a silence that could either break them or lift them higher. And just when the tension seemed to settle, another twist arrived. An elderly woman, dressed simply, walked toward them from the crowd. She did not belong to the world of glitter and gold. She was not famous, nor was she powerful. But the way she carried herself made everyone step aside. She approached Keanu and Sandra, her eyes shining with tears. "I came here tonight thinking I would be invisible," she said, her voice trembling yet strong. "But watching the way you stood in silence, watching the way you carried kindness instead of pride, it gave me hope. It reminded me that humility still exists in a world drowning in noise." The room froze again. Nobody had expected her words. They cut deeper than any insult, deeper than any compliment. They were truth, raw and undeniable. Keanu bent slightly, lowering his head in respect to the woman. Sandra gently held her hand, and in that simple act, the party transformed once more. The chandeliers did not shine brighter, but the hearts of the people did. The crowd realized that this night was no longer just about a party. It was about something greater, a mirror held up to everyone's soul, a reminder that kindness can silence envy, that humility can win over pride, and that respect is the only currency that never loses value. But envy does not die easily. As applause filled the room for the elderly woman's words, the group of powerful guests in the corner tightened their fists. They had been invisible tonight, and their pride would not let it rest. A plan was forming, a darker one, that would test everything Keanu and Sandra stood for. The night was far from over. The storm behind the smiles, the party hall glittered with golden light, but beneath the shimmer lay shadows. Keanu and Sandra stood quietly at the center, still holding hands. Their calm presence a silent contrast to the restless energy swirling around them. To many, they had already won the night with humility and grace. Yet, in the corners of the room where power often hides, a storm was brewing. The group of powerful guests, men and women who thrived on influence, whose names carried weight in every circle, were restless. They had spent years controlling conversations, deciding who would be admired and who would be forgotten. Tonight, without lifting a finger, Keanu and Sandra had shifted the balance. Their silence had spoken louder than power, and that was something the influential ones could not accept. "They think respect is enough," whispered one man, his eyes narrowed. "Let us see if it still holds when the room turns against them." His companions nodded, their smiles sharp and cold. At that same moment, Sandra sensed something. Her instincts were sharp. Years in the public eye had taught her how quickly admiration could turn into cruelty. She leaned toward Keanu and whispered, "Do you feel it? The smiles around us are too heavy. Something is coming." Keanu did not deny it. He looked into her eyes with calm steadiness. "Storms come," he said softly, "but storms also pass. We will hold." The first move of the storm was subtle. A new song began to play, one chosen not by chance, but by design. It was loud, dramatic, almost mocking. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, sensing tension but not fully understanding it. Then the whispers began again. But this time, they were planted. "Did you hear what they said before they came here?" One guest whispered loudly, enough to be overheard. "Apparently, this whole hand-in-hand act is nothing but a staged performance." Another voice followed. "Yes, I heard they planned it to make headlines, to steal attention away from others tonight." The seeds of doubt spread quickly. The same people who had moments ago admired Keanu and Sandra now felt uncertainty creeping in. Admiration is fragile when poisoned by suspicion. Sandra's heart tightened as she noticed the shift in the room. Eyes that once looked with respect now carried a flicker of doubt. Whispers twisted the truth, bending it into something sharp and dangerous. She felt the weight of it pressing in, but Keanu's steady hand in hers reminded her not to break. Then came the second move. One of the powerful guests, a tall man with a commanding voice, raised his glass and spoke loudly enough for all to hear. "To humility," he announced with a mocking smile, "though some wear it only as a costume." Laughter followed from his circle, sharp and deliberate. The words sliced through the hall like a knife. The crowd tensed, waiting for a reply. All eyes turned to Keanu and Sandra again. Some expected anger. Others expected them to walk away. But what happened next silenced even the cruelest whispers. Keanu slowly stepped forward, his face calm, his eyes gentle. He raised his own glass, but not in mockery. "To kindness," he said softly, his voice carrying through the hall. "Because kindness cannot be a costume. It lives in how we choose to treat even those who mock us." His words did not roar, but they struck deeply. The silence that followed was heavier than applause. Some guests lowered their eyes, ashamed of how quickly they had doubted. Others were moved, their hearts stirred by the quiet strength of his answer. But the powerful guests did not stop. Pride rarely surrenders easily. One of them smirked and said, "Beautiful words, but let us see if you can stand when truth is tested." He gestured, and from the back of the hall, a man stepped forward, a journalist known for exposing secrets. Gasps filled the room. The journalist held papers in his hand, his expression serious. "Shall we?" he said. "People love stories of kindness, but they love scandals even more." The hall held its breath. The storm had broken fully now. It was no longer whispers. It was an open challenge. Sandra's eyes hardened, not with fear, but with resolve. She whispered to Keanu, "They want to break us. They want to see if our silence will shatter." Keanu squeezed her hand gently. "Then we will not shatter. We will show them that storms cannot drown truth." The journalist stepped closer, lifting the papers as if ready to speak. Tension burned in every corner of the room. Guests leaned forward, torn between curiosity and dread. The night that had begun with shock was now turning into a trial, a test of resilience, respect, and the strength of humility under fire. And in that moment, everyone realized something. This was no longer just a party. This was a stage. And the lesson that would unfold here tonight would be remembered long after the chandeliers stopped shining. The test of truth. The journalist stood tall in the center of the hall, papers trembling faintly in his hands. The golden chandeliers above did not shine as brightly as before. Or maybe it was the unease of the crowd that dimmed their glow. Every face was turned toward him, waiting for the strike, waiting for the scandal that would shatter the calm dignity Keanu and Sandra had carried into the party. The powerful guests leaned back in their chairs with satisfied smirks, as if they were hunters who had finally cornered their prey. One of them whispered, This is where the masks fall. Let us see if humility survives when the truth is revealed. Keanu's face remained calm, but his silence was not empty. It was steady, unshaken. Beside him, Sandra felt her heart pounding, but her grip on his hand did not loosen. She whispered, almost too softly for anyone to hear, "They want the crowd to see weakness. We must not give them that gift." The journalist cleared his throat, his voice sharp and heavy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "you have all admired the display before you. You have whispered about their humility, their grace, their so-called kindness. But ask yourselves, do you really know the truth? Or are you blinded by the image they wish to show?" The hall stirred. The crowd was restless, torn between curiosity and loyalty. Admiration is fragile when placed against doubt. The journalist raised the papers in his hand. "I hold here information that questions everything you think you know. Secrets that could change admiration into disappointment." He paused, letting the words sink in, letting the tension grow heavy in the air. Then, with deliberate drama, he unfolded the first page. But before he could speak further, something unexpected happened. An older man from the crowd, a quiet figure who had been unnoticed all evening, stepped forward. His voice was calm but carried weight. "Before you speak, let me ask you one thing. Do you seek truth? Or do you seek to break those who carry kindness simply because you envy the respect they have earned?" The hall froze. The journalist faltered. The powerful guests frowned, not expecting anyone to intervene. Keanu finally spoke, his voice low yet strong. "Truth is never our enemy," he said softly. "If what you hold in your hands is truth, then let it be spoken. But if it is twisted by envy, it will only hurt those who believe it, not those who live honestly." His words were not defensive. They carried no fear, only quiet confidence. And that confidence spread through the hall like a calming tide. Some of the guests, who moments ago leaned eagerly for scandal, now hesitated. Sandra added her voice, steady and gentle. "Humility does not mean weakness. Kindness does not mean we have nothing to hide. It means that even if shadows are thrown at us, we will not throw shadows back. We will remain light." The journalist opened his mouth to read, but his hands trembled. He was not used to being confronted with such calm strength. He had expected anger, denial, or fear. Instead, he found himself staring at two people who carried truth not in their words alone, but in their presence. And then came another twist. The elderly woman who had spoken earlier in the night, the one who said their humility gave her hope, stepped forward again. Her voice, though soft, cut through the silence. "I have lived long enough to know when words are poisoned. I see no scandal here. I see no lies. I see two people who walked into this room and reminded us of what matters: respect, resilience, kindness. If you carry papers meant to destroy that, then it is not truth you hold, but envy dressed as truth." Her words drew murmurs of agreement from parts of the crowd. Admiration began to return, heavier now, more resistant to the seeds of doubt. The journalist's voice caught in his throat. The powerful guests exchanged uneasy glances. Their plan, which had seemed so certain, was unraveling. Respect was not breaking under pressure. It was growing stronger, but pride does not retreat so easily. One of the powerful guests stood, his voice cutting through the hall. "Words. All of this. Just words. Anyone can claim humility. Anyone can act kind when the crowd is watching. But what of when no one is watching? Do you still carry respect then?" Keanu looked directly at him, his eyes calm, his voice steady. "The truest measure of who we are is not in moments like this, when eyes are on us, but in the quiet hours when no one will ever know. And yes, even then, we choose respect. Even then, we choose kindness." The hall was silent. No music played, no glasses clinked. It was as if the entire night was holding its breath, realizing that this was no ordinary exchange. This was a lesson unfolding before their eyes, a reminder of something most had forgotten. Strength is not in wealth or power or fear. Strength is in standing unshaken when others try to pull you down. And in that silence, admiration returned. Once more, not shallow admiration, but something deeper, something that touched the hearts of even those who resisted it. The journalist lowered his papers. His voice cracked slightly as he whispered, "Sometimes, the truth is not on paper. Sometimes, the truth is in how people stand when tested." And with that, he stepped back, his role in the storm quietly ending. The powerful guests, however, were not done. Their pride burned hotter now, and they would not leave without another attempt. They leaned close together, whispering in shadows, plotting their next move. The storm had shifted, but it had not ended. The breaking point, the chandeliers still, glowed above, but the hall no longer felt like a place for celebration. It felt like a stage where kindness and envy were locked in battle. Keanu and Sandra had stood against whispers, against mockery, even against the sharp edge of a journalist's threat. But the night was not finished with them. The powerful guests, their pride wounded, were not willing to accept defeat. They gathered in the far corner, their faces half hidden in the dim light. Their voices were low, but their anger was sharp. "They embarrass us by standing calm," one of them hissed. "Every word they speak turns against us. We must do more than whisper. We must strike where it hurts most." Another guest, a woman known for her ruthless ability to twist truth into scandal, leaned forward. "Then we expose them not with papers, not with words, but with spectacle. The crowd does not remember what is whispered. They remember what is seen. If we cannot make them look guilty, then we make them look broken." And so, their plan began. While the crowd tried to return to its music and chatter, small movements took place in the background. Servants rushed nervously as if under quiet orders. The powerful guests arranged the room without anyone noticing, directing lights, shifting attention, waiting for the moment to strike. Sandra felt the shift before she understood it. Her eyes moved across the hall, noticing how the whispers had slowed, how the crowd was being guided without realizing. She leaned toward Keanu, her voice hushed but urgent. "They are not finished. Something is about to happen." Keanu's calm face did not change, but his grip on her hand grew firmer. "Then let it happen," he said softly. Storms reveal more truth than calm skies ever could. The moment arrived when one of the powerful guests, the tall man with the commanding voice, clapped his hands for silence. The music stopped. All eyes turned toward him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, "tonight we have witnessed many things. We have seen humility spoken. We have heard kindness claimed. But words are easy. Let us see how humility looks when the light of judgment is truly upon it." With a sharp gesture, he signaled. The lights in the hall shifted suddenly, narrowing into a harsh spotlight that fell directly on Keanu and Sandra. The crowd gasped. What had been a celebration was now a trial, staged for everyone to see. The man continued, his voice heavy with accusation. "You walk here hand in hand, you speak of kindness, of humility. But tell us, what are you hiding? What is your truth when there is no crowd to admire you? Or do you think that your silence will always protect you?" The hall grew tense. Whispers rose again, fueled by spectacle. The powerful guests had done exactly as planned. They had turned the moment into theater, forcing everyone to watch as if this were a performance where scandal was expected to erupt. Sandra's heart pounded, but she stood tall, refusing to shrink under the spotlight. She looked out at the faces in the crowd, some doubtful, some supportive, some eager for drama. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "Humility is not proven by escaping judgment," she said. "It is proven by standing through it, without losing respect for ourselves or for others." Keanu stepped forward beside her, the spotlight now burning against his calm face. "You wish to break us," he said gently, his words echoing in the heavy silence. "But you cannot break what does not fight back. You cannot shatter what chooses to bend with grace instead of resist with anger." The words were powerful, but the powerful guests were not ready to surrender. One of them shouted, "Then answer this. Why here? Why tonight? Why come together like this, unless it is to steal attention?" The crowd stirred. It was the sharpest accusation yet. Keanu's eyes softened, his voice low but clear. "We did not come here to steal attention. We came because sometimes the world forgets what respect looks like. And if tonight reminded even one heart of what it means to carry kindness, then every whisper, every test, every insult was worth it." His words fell heavy into the silence, and for a moment, nobody spoke. The spotlight that had been meant to expose weakness instead revealed strength that could not be shaken. And then, another unexpected twist. From the back of the hall, a young woman stepped forward. She had been silent all evening, almost invisible among the glittering crowd. Her eyes were wet with tears as she spoke. "I came here tonight feeling small," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I thought I would never matter among people of wealth and fame, but when I saw you stand against whispers, when I saw you face anger with calm, I realized something. Humility gives hope. Kindness gives strength. You reminded me that even the smallest person can carry dignity." The hall was silent again, but this time it was filled not with doubt, but with a quiet reverence. The young woman's words had pierced through the noise, cutting past envy and pride. Some guests lowered their heads, ashamed of their laughter and their whispers. Others clapped softly, then louder, until the hall filled with applause. But in the corner, the powerful guests sat frozen. Their plan had turned against them. Their attempt to break Keanu and Sandra had instead lifted them higher in the eyes of the crowd. Envy had not silenced kindness. It had only made it shine brighter. And yet, the night was not done. One of the powerful guests leaned forward, his eyes cold and determined. "They have won this round," he muttered. "But the night is not over. If they stand again, then we must strike harder, harder than before." The storm had reached its breaking point, but the final wave was still waiting to crash. The final test, the applause still echoed through the golden hall, but it was not the shallow applause of a party. It was heavy, filled with something deeper, admiration, respect, even guilt. Keanu and Sandra had stood in the spotlight and, instead of breaking, they had turned the moment into proof that humility could survive envy. But storms do not surrender so easily. In the farthest corner of the room, the powerful guests gathered once more. Their pride was now a wound, bleeding, with humiliation. Their whispers grew sharp, colder than before. "They are winning not because they fight," one spat bitterly, "but because they refuse to. We must do more. We must strike at the heart, not the surface." The woman among them, the one with the ruthless smile, leaned closer. "Then we test them with something no words can defend. We bring not whispers, not spotlights, but betrayal. Let us see if their kindness survives when the knife comes from the crowd itself." And so the final plan began. The music resumed in the hall, soft and cautious, like the strings of a violin unsure of the notes it played. The guests tried to smile, tried to drink, tried to pretend the storm was over. But beneath the surface, tension brewed. Everyone sensed that something was unfinished. Then it came. One of the powerful guests stood suddenly, his voice loud and sharp. "Enough of this game. If humility and kindness are so true, then let the crowd decide. Let the people themselves judge." He raised his glass high, his words echoing through the chandeliers. "Who here believes this display of humility is real? And who believes it is only a costume, a performance designed to steal our eyes?" The hall froze. This was no longer a challenge from a few powerful figures. This was a trap laid before everyone. The crowd itself was being forced to choose admiration or doubt, respect or envy. For a moment, silence held. The air was thick with uncertainty. Some guests looked at each other nervously. Others stared at Keanu and Sandra, waiting for them to defend themselves. Sandra's breath caught in her chest. This was different. Whispers could be silenced, insults could be endured, but the judgment of an entire room, that was heavier than any spotlight. She looked at Keanu, her eyes searching. He met her gaze with the same steady calm he had carried all night. His hand pressed gently against hers. "Do not fear the crowd," he whispered. "Truth does not need defense. It only needs to stand." Then slowly he turned to face the room. His voice was quiet, but it reached every corner. "You ask whether humility is real, whether kindness is a costume? But humility is not proven by applause, and kindness is not kept alive by judgment. It is proven in the smallest choices, in the moments no one sees. If you doubt us tonight, then doubt. If you believe us, then believe. We will not force either. We will only continue to choose kindness, whether eyes are on us or not." His words hung in the air like a candle in darkness, fragile, flickering yet powerful enough to light the room. And then, the unexpected happened. From the back of the hall, the elderly woman who had spoken earlier stood once more. Her voice shook, but her eyes burned with strength. "I am old," she said, "and I have seen enough to know that envy destroys faster than truth. Tonight, I saw not costumes, not performance, but something I thought was lost in this world. Respect, resilience, humility. And if we, the crowd, cannot see it, then the blindness is ours, not theirs." She stepped closer, her hand reaching for Sandra's. "Tonight, they reminded me of my own youth, when kindness was enough to bind people together. Let us not be fools who throw away such a gift." Her words cracked the silence, and like a chain breaking, the crowd began to shift. One by one, guests nodded. Some clapped softly. Others whispered words of agreement. Soon, applause filled the hall again, but this time it was not hesitant. It was certain. The powerful guests sat frozen, their plans shattered. The very crowd they had tried to twist had turned against them, not because of defense or cleverness, but because truth had stood quietly, unshaken, until envy collapsed under its own weight. Tears welled in Sandra's eyes, though her smile was steady. She squeezed Keanu's hand and whispered, "We didn't have to fight. We only had to stand." Keanu nodded gently. "Storms are loud," he said softly, "but they always end. And when they do, what remains is what was strong enough to endure." The hall, once filled with whispers of jealousy, was now filled with something else, respect that could not be undone. People who had arrived for glamour and gossip left with hearts touched, their minds restless with questions of their own lives. How many times had they chosen pride over humility, envy over kindness? Tonight was not just about Keanu and Sandra. It was a mirror held up to everyone. And as the night came to its close and the chandeliers dimmed, one truth remained. Nobody expected them to show up like that, hand in hand, carrying nothing but calm and kindness. But their presence had changed the party forever.